Everyone. Welcome to Politics and Prose Bookstore. My name is Jenny Kleins, and I run our small self-publishing press called Opus. 3 years ago, Politics and Prose embarked on a new endeavor. When we acquired an espresso book machine that we call Opus, we signed on to help local authors self-publish their manuscripts and sell them to their communities. It's been a great 3 years, and I'm really glad to be a part of the process. This afternoon's event is a particularly special one. I'm delighted to welcome 5 of our Opus authors who have published with us and are selling their hard work at our store. So we have Beverly Green and Anthony Johnson, who are going to discuss their book called The Dumb One. We have Susan Orleans, who's going to talk about her book, Confessions of a Worrywart. We have Mary Gallagher, who will talk about her book, My Life with Jacqueline Kennedy. And we have Richard Selbin, who's going to talk about his book of poems that's called Pearls Beneath the Rind. All of their books are available for purchase right now in the store, and we'll be printing more of them after the event. If you haven't seen how the machine works, it's pretty cool, so you should come check it out. They'll each read a little bit from their books, or they'll talk about their writing process or the process of publishing through our store. Each author or pair of authors is going to have 10 minutes. At the end of that time, at the end of all of that, we'll have a question and answer time. So if you have questions for any of the authors, you can ask at the microphone over here, and they'll help you out and they'll answer your questions for you. So also after this, we'll have a nice group picture. And if anybody has any questions for me about the machine, I'll be here. So let's get started. First up is Beverly Green and Anthony Johnson talking about The Dumb One.
Thank you. Thank you. Together.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Hello. I guess we'll talk a little bit about how Mr. Anthony. Thank you. I thought it was so loud I didn't need the microphone, but I'll talk a little bit about how Mr. Anthony I actually met. I was a volunteer tutor for through Literacy Volunteers and Advocates, and Mr. Anthony became one of my one-on-one students. So I was there to help him through his literacy process, and during that time, he had mentioned to me, people always say I should write my story down. And as we got to know each other more and more, and I got to hear more about his story and his family, I said, yes, you should definitely do that one day. So a year later, I actually stopped volunteering because I moved further away. And maybe 6 months after that, Mr. Anthony contacted me and said, Miss Beverly, would you mind helping me write my story? And I was like, I feel honored. So that's how it started. And so I got a chance to learn even more about Mr. Anthony, and not just about him, but his family. He comes from a family of actually 7 children. 6 of which who were all illiterate. So it wasn't just him. They all had issues with reading and writing. So they have a very fascinating story. And when I first started out, I really wanted it to be a cathartic experience for him. But it grew to so much more, and it's really impacted a lot of people. So I'm very happy to be a part of it. And I was honored that he asked me, because he could have asked someone else. So I'll let Mr. Anthony tell you a bit more.
Good afternoon, everyone. How you guys doing? The book is called The Dumb One. It came about because that's how I felt when I was a kid. I had every teacher, my mom, and everybody else would always call me dumb, stupid, and other things. So I became the book. It became me, rather. I became that one that never learned how to read, going through life, just basically living in a box, trying to figure out what I'm going to do from day to day. How am I going to survive as I get older? Pretty much always kept a job, always, kept myself busy. Have always had people in my life that pretty much kept me on point, pretty much gave me the guidance that I needed, showed me the things that I needed to do, and always just basically stay on top of me and make sure I did what I had to do. So the book basically, like Ms. Beverly said, is about six kids, my brothers and sisters, we all grew up illiterate. My mother was illiterate. So it started from the top and just twinkled its way all the way down. So we all basically become, as I like to call, illiteracy function. So we can do just enough to get by. And we all also, I have my sister that's a motivated speaker. She goes around the world and speak. And she's also just, one of my persons in my life that means a lot to me because of her, got my ball going and got me doing the things that I need to do for me. And Miss Beverly has always been there for me and just kept me going in the right way. It's a very interesting book, if I don't say so myself. It's a way that I get to also speak about illiteracy, because illiteracy is really a big thing, and it's not just me. It's 1,000 other people through all walks of life that really can't read and write that well. And I go to class with a lot of these guys, and for some reason, it's like it's a lot of older people, but now, at these times it's changing, it's a lot of younger people that can't read and write or don't read and write that well. And me personally, I want to be the advocate to speak out for all these people that can't do this and show them and tell them. And in this book, it's not just about the reading and writing, it's about going to school and the bullying. When I was in elementary school for the first 6 years, me and my brothers and sisters, we got beat up every day for the first 6 years of our lives, moving into this new neighborhood that we knew nothing about. My mom didn't allow us to really come outside and play. So as learning as a child to be where I am now, it's just, and then you hear about the bullying with these kids today to back when I was coming up. It was, I don't know if they call it bullying or what they call it, but it was nothing compared to today. It was twice as worse back then. So, like I said, the book is, wow. It tells a lot about just growing up in the ghetto, going to school and having a teacher to tell you that I have mine, you need to get yours, or just asking for help and not being able to get it. Wow, I don't know. You want to speak some more?
Was there a particular passage you wanted to draw their attention to?
Okay.
As I mentioned before, when we worked on the book, because it's just not about Mr. Anthony, it's about his other siblings as well. I got a chance to interview some of his other siblings and how they were affected by things that happened as they were growing up, and how literacy affected their whole life and how they approach things. And just imagine, one of the things Mr. Anthony talked about when we first started is he said he wanted to be able to go into the store and not have to look at the label, the picture on the label of a product. He wanted to be able to read what was there, or to go outside and read the street signs and so forth. So those small things that we take for granted every day, this is what people have to deal with all the time when they are struggling with reading and writing. And it seems like it would be so simple, but it takes a lot, one, to survive, to be, as a literate person, you have to be very smart already, and very clever. Because they're working, and he has a sister who works in government, and they all have this same issue, and you just would never know it. People come up with different coping mechanisms in order to survive. And that's one of the things as an adult learner that you have to kind of work against, because you've come up with all these tricks. And Mr. Anthony and I have talked about that a lot. About all the tricks. I'm like, okay, you need to read what's there, not what you think it's going to be. So, so the book has it's a lot going on, and you're gonna learn a lot about his life. So I do encourage everyone to pick up a copy and read it. It's definitely something that you want to share with others. And of course, DC, I'm sure some of you already know, has like the highest population of illiterate adults, which is crazy because it's our nation's capital. And however, we are, for some reason, we have we're like number one in resources in terms of literature, but we have the highest rate of illiteracy. it just doesn't make any sense. So there's a disconnect between those who actually need the services and those who are, and how, the availability or being knowledgeable of how to get those services. So is there a particular...
I'm just going to read this first little small chapter.
Okay.
Just to give you guys kind of an understanding. It's really small, okay? About how it was when we was coming up, and basically it's like chapter 1, and it reads out, "Hurry up, Paul, hurry up and get up on the tree," Fat Mike told Paul. Hurry up, get up on the tree, Fat Mike told Paul, as he pushes him hard towards the falling old oak tree. "If you move, we are going to beat you up," says Fat Mike. I mean, that was basically every day for us, trying to figure out how to get to school safe. And then when you got to school, it was like, how do I get my education when I can't focus on school? I got to try to figure out how I'm going to get back home without getting beat up by not just one person, but it was a couple of people. So, it was just, it was rough. But, we all pretty much lived through it. We're moving forward. And, as I say, my brothers and sisters, they're doing a book of their own as being adults and dealing with illiteracy. So, thank you guys for listening. If anybody have anything. Anybody have any questions, I'll be more than glad to answer right quick.
Let's ask questions at the
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So next up, we have Susan Orleans with Confessions of a Worrywart.
So, what did your high school yearbook say about you? Mine said, "Happy I am, from care I'm free." It should have said, "Happy I am, I will grow up to worry about my dog's self-esteem and decapitation by ceiling fan." I blog about worry, and then I worry about blogging. And as you might appreciate this, a friend calls my worries white girl worries, and I worry about that. So let's acknowledge that up front. But my anxiety also extends to relationships with husbands, lovers, psychotherapists, and China. In 1979, I married a man I called Jeff in the book. And 2 weeks later, we moved to Beijing. We landed in a China that was like a black and white movie in slow motion. You could hardly tell the men from the women in their washed-out, baggy Mao suits. During our 15 months there, I taught English to a group of women doctors. They were so poor that they would unravel, on their 1 day a week off, they'd unravel their sweaters and re-knit them to redistribute the worn spots. So 6 years, one daughter, and 3 miscarriages later, I was living in New York with my husband and my daughter Eliza. And I get a call from the doctor, and he says, "Susan, I'm sorry, you might not be able to hold another pregnancy." And all afternoon, I worried that I'd never be able to provide a sibling for Eliza. As if on cue, my husband calls from Beijing, where he was working on a deal, and he said, "Suze, I can't come home, get Eliza, and fly over here to be with me." And we were living, did I say we were living in New York at the time? And I said, "If I come, I want to try to adopt a baby." And he said, "Okay." As though I said, I want to try to adopt a hamster. And in fact, foreign adoption at that time was unheard of. Well, Eliza and I were 30,000 feet over the Pacific. His deal fell through. But mine, of trying to adopt, was just beginning. The first day, I went to Tiananmen Square where the People's Court is, and I spoke to a young official who said, "I'm so sorry. Adoption will not be possible as you already have one child." He was applying China's one-child policy to me. I pointed out that if I were to adopt, it would reduce China's population by 1. Well, he suggested I state my case in writing. And I wanted to appeal to the Chinese communist sensibility, so I peppered my essay with words like heartfelt and motherland. And I promised to provide lots of fresh fruits and vegetables. I was devastated by this man's pessimism, but I wasn't giving up. So I contacted my doctor friends. We went to dinner, and I said, "Can you help me find a baby?" They immediately began clucking like a bunch of yentas, if you know what that is, and if you don't, you can imagine. And Dr. Dong said, "We have a plan. The next time a girl comes in for an abortion, if she's pretty and smart and nice, we'll tell her not to have the abortion, and that will be your baby." And Dr. Sun and OBGYN piped up, "And I'll deliver it." Well, the next day, another friend said to me, he said, "Why would you want to adopt a stranger's baby when you could take my little girl?" Everyone wanted to get their kids out of China. Well, a month passed, and we had no feasible options, and it was time to go back to New York. But just then, we found out about a teenage factory worker who was 8.5 months pregnant, and she thought she'd be able to marry her boyfriend, but the workplace denied them permission to marry. If she had had the baby out of wedlock, that child at that time would have been a social outcast, not even permitted to attend school. So I arranged an appointment for her with Dr. Sun, my friend. And among other things, Dr. Sun asked the girl about her hobbies. Find the page here. Okay. I was all set with my Post-it. Naturally, a worrywart has this all worked out. Oh, okay, there we are. Dr. Sun later said that the girl liked to sing and read and ice skate. "So do I thought with glee, as if this childbearing factory worker and I would be able to curl up on a couch reading novels together, or glide around the frozen moat of the Forbidden City arm in arm. Or just maybe there was a baby inside of her who would someday read and skate with me." Well, the teenager did plan to give up the child for adoption, but I couldn't stop worrying what all my Chinese friends told me. They said, if it's a boy, she'll keep it. Well, you can read the whole story of that in my book. And so how did I come to self-publish? And I'll say at the outset, aside from how hard it is to get a publisher, I thought about the alternative. I thought about the time and effort it would take to write a proposal, find an agent, get a publisher, and then wait 2 years for the book to be published. And in today's world, most authors have to do their own publicity. So self-publishing was an easy decision. Writing about the people who populate my life was less easy. Take, for example, my ex-husband, Jeff. I might call Jeff. When our daughters were 9, 10, and 14, I found out he was having an affair. And 2 years later, we divorced. So I didn't want to expose Jeff in my book. And at the same time, the divorce was pivotal to my story. So I wrote it as my story, what I went through. And I showed that chapter to our daughters, who I knew would be protective of him. And they approved. So it does appear in the book. And since we have a little extra time today, I'm not as nervous as I look. I have a tremor, so I just have to say that I'm a little nervous. Anyhow, What if I meet a guy I like? Sometime during the decade of the OOs, I began to worry. What if I meet a guy I like? Monday, he gets up. I want to stay in bed, but now I can't fall back to sleep. Or I get up and he wants to sleep, so I can't turn on NPR. Breakfast. I make myself French toast and a cup of steaming black coffee, and just as I'm about to sit down and enjoy reading the Times, he trots in and says, that smells good. He never eats French toast, or I would have made enough for him. I share mine because otherwise I'd feel guilty, but now I feel hungry and my peaceful breakfast with newspaper is spoiled. I walk the dog, after which I set up my laptop to work outdoors. He asks if I want to bike along the river with him. Now I'm conflicted because a bike ride sounds great, but so does my routine of working outdoors. Either way, I'll be frustrated. I'll regret that I made the wrong choice. The day rumbles along like this with either interruptions or too many choices. Lord knows there were enough choices before he came along. On the other hand, some of the choices I used to enjoy, like walking with friends, have been reduced because of the time I spend biking and hanging out with him. Night draws nigh, and with it comes the daily discussion of what, when, and where to eat. He feels like going out. I feel like eating home. He's hungry now and wants real food. I'm not, and I don't. I just polished off a chunk of dark chocolate, a handful of almonds, and a large glass of milk, which will keep me satisfied for hours. And this is my favorite diet tip, by the way. Always do that before I go out to dinner. I longed for the nights before he came along when the second I got hungry, I could stand by the kitchen TV watching The Bachelor while wolfing down stuffed grape leaves and picking at prosciutto without soiling any plates or utensils. We end up eating at home, and after dinner, he wants to settle in with Cops and Robbers or the local news on TV. But I don't like those scary shows. Casey, my dog, who used to rest his head on my lap, jumps onto his lap. A while later, one of us is ready to go to bed, the other isn't. One of us wants to have sex, the other doesn't. He raises the thermostat. After his breathing shifts into slumber, I lower the thermostat. Tuesday to Friday, it's the same. He's retired. Except Wednesday nights, I watch Survivor and he sulks. Saturday and Sunday. When you don't go to an office during the week, weekends aren't all that different. But after a lifetime of conditioning, they feel different. On Saturday night, he thinks we should go out to dinner and a movie. I get rattled by noisy eating establishments and crowded theaters. It's a perfect night to be cozy at home. There must be reasons people pair off into living spaces, but I can't remember what those reasons are. Of all the things I worry about, finding a mate is not one of them, unless you count the worry that I will meet someone I like. So anyhow, my book is a memoir, not a how-to, but people say it inspires them to live with gusto despite their anxiety. And I want to thank Politics and Prose and all of you for listening.
Next, we have Mary Gallagher, who's going to read from her book, My Life with Jacqueline Kennedy.
Is the mic set so that I can reach it like that?
Yeah, it's adjusted.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. When I was first told of this event, I was instructed to prepare a talk that I would give for 7 minutes. I arrived here this afternoon and understand I'm being a minute or two after that will not disrupt the whole procedure. That was the biggest relief of the day. Oh, I said, what? I worked 5 days struggling. I mean, I had a basket full of all the previous written notes and corrections, deductions, and tearing up and in the basket. 5 days later, as we left the house today, my son, God bless him, I said, Chris, I finally threw away all the papers that I prepared to give my 7-minute speech. I come in here, I got a minute or two, so bear with me. Because I prepared a 3-page, and I like to stand here and just talk verbatim, but I was warned ahead of time, you talk so much and you talk so fast, you'll never get in 7 minutes. I said, okay, I promise I will, and I'm going to try right now. Oh, boy, it wasn't easy. But let me get my glasses on first. I think they're in here. Yeah, okay. There's a lot to be said. So here I go. and I'll try not to talk too fast. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Borelli Gallagher, and the title of my book is My Life with Jacqueline Kennedy. This is a reissue of the original publication 45 years ago in September 1969 that has been out of print for a number of years but is now available here at Politics and Prose. It was printed in 6 other countries besides the United States in both hardback and paperback editions, and in just 6 weeks was rated #1 on Time magazine's bestseller list. On the front page of the book, I explain how it originally came to be within 6 months as a result of Mrs. Kennedy's move to Greece and her remarriage to Aristotle Onassis in October 1968. And I'll show you, this is the original book. So with that said, let me fill in the details. My book is a personal reflection of my 12-year secretarial career and close association with the President and Mrs. John F. Kennedy and their families that all began in November 1952 when he was first elected to the United States Senate. He personally appointed me in Boston to be one of his first 4 secretaries in his Capitol Hill office in Washington, D.C., and I was sworn in on January 3, 1953, assigned to handle his immigration cases and Department of State matters. I did this for the next 3.5 years until 2 weeks before the birth of our first son, Christopher, in May of 1956, when I could no longer work on a full-time schedule. I'm going to break right here since I have a few extra seconds to inject a memory that comes into my mind at that point. As I say, I was in the office and, kind of showing that I was expecting this first child. And on a morning when Senator Kennedy at the time passed my desk in the Senate suite there, "Good morning, Mary. Mary dear," he always said, "Good morning, Mary dear. How are you feeling this morning?" I looked up and I said, "Oh, Senator, I feel just great." "Oh, good," then he said, "You'll be around a while longer." I said, "No, maybe 2 weeks," I said, "and that's it. I'm out of here." He said, "But you just said you felt fine." I said, "I know, but first things first," and I'm pointing here, and the girls in the Senate are screaming, "Will you get her out of here? We'll have an emergency in the Senate for sure." So that took care of that memory that just flashed in my mind. So anyway, I couldn't work full-time anymore. But following my Senate years, I worked part-time for the Senator's mother-in-law, Mrs. Auchincloss, at her Marywood estate in McLean, Virginia, who had called that fall saying, "Jack suggested I call you." And then in January of 1957, I started with his wife, Jacqueline Bouvier, at her Georgetown home for a day or 2 a week as well. However, with the onset of the presidential campaign year of 1960, I was suddenly forced into full-time, 24/7, strictly for Mrs. Kennedy, which her mother well understood when I could no longer help her at Marywood. As she said, "Jackie comes first now." So then we're in the White House, okay? As personal secretary to the First Lady, my duties were many and varied. That also included handling all the bookkeeping matters of her personal expenses. From our earliest days at Georgetown, the president kept a close, watchful eye on his wife's expenditures and held me responsible for furnishing him with periodic statements to be kept informed, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, etc., sometimes even in between. Like a job in itself, I dealt with it mostly at home on evenings and weekends, and then at times would have to deflect his wrath over Mrs. Kennedy's spending habits as he scrutinized and questioned my statements. Quote, "The black book," unquote, as we referred to the 3-ring binder holding the ledger accounts I kept, was always up to date and at the ready. And that brings back another memory where the bookkeeping matters started. In 1957, in their first rented house on P Street in Georgetown, I arrived on a morning when I was expecting Gregory, and so I'm going up to the 2nd floor, and I passed a bedroom, and there was a senator, and I couldn't help but, he waved, like this, and I noticed he had kind of a puffy cheek, but I went to the study next door to work on Mrs. Kennedy's bills, and I tried very much to be quiet, so I wouldn't disturb him. I thought he would be resting anyway. After like a few hours, he comes padding into the study where I was, checking over what I was doing at the desk there, and he said, "What's all this here?" And I said, "Well, those are the checks I've just written on Mrs. Kennedy's bills." And he's scattering them all around the desk. And finally, after a few minutes, he said, "From now on, Mary, see to it that I have a report. I want to know whatever is being spent and how it's being spent at all times." Well, that was the beginning of the bookkeeping. That was 57. We're now in the White House. It accelerated from there. Okay. So now, in May of 1957, our second son, Gregory, was born, and during the White House years, he and Chris became good friends with little Caroline, close in age. Her cat, Tom Kitten, boarded at our house, and quite often she would come to visit accompanied by her Secret Service agents. And then on the boys' visits to the White House, they enjoyed riding Caroline's pony, Macaroni, riding tricycles on the roof of the White House outside of Caroline's play school, jumping on the trampoline and scampering through the treehouse on the south lawn, all in view of the president's office in the West Wing. On one afternoon, he came out to talk to the boys and commented, "I'm so happy your mother could help my wife." In February of 1962, Mrs. Kennedy completed her brilliant restoration of the White House, which eventually led to her most impressive appearance on TV of the White House tour. And then, almost a month later, on March 7, the day before she left on a big trip to India, she came to our house with Caroline and John Jr., accompanied by Secret Service agents for an afternoon visit to see Tom Kitten and to have dinner with us before returning to the White House. A photo of that special occasion appears in this book. And by the way, this is from the hardback there. This is the reissue. I'll just give you an idea what that's like. So that's the soft cover. In 1963, I spent the summer at Cape Cod, Massachusetts to be with Mrs. Kennedy, who was expecting another baby. On August 7th, baby Patrick was born, but would only live for 2 days. I described what it was like at Otis Air Force Base Hospital those several days for the president and all the family members in trying to cope with such a sad event. In describing my travels with the First Lady on Air Force One, I have included a detailed first-hand account of our trip to Dallas, Texas, where I rode in the presidential motorcade through downtown Dallas as it made its way to the Trade Mart, just a short stretch ahead, for the luncheon where the president was scheduled to speak on that fateful day, November 22, 1963. To this day, my most vivid memory continues to be that of the policeman climbing the grassy knoll with his gun drawn. And at the same time, I have no memory at all of our leaving Parkland Hospital after learning of the president's death for the ride to Love Field for our return flight to Washington. I get goosebumps even now when I talk about it because the memories are still so fresh. I continued working for Mrs. Kennedy for a year following this tragic event until she moved to New York in October of 1964 to start a new life for her and the children, severing all ties to Washington, D.C. This book reveals Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy as a real person, as a wife, as a mother, as a seeker of perfection in art and life. It is a truthful, factual portrayal of how I saw and knew her during our years together, and is meant to help answer the one question that was most frequently asked of me over the years: what is Jackie really like? Of all the books written about her, I believe that mine is the one that most shows her as a real human being with many facets to her personality, the real woman beneath the goddess figure the world's idolatry made her. And only by reading the whole book can the complexities of her personality and life be understood. I'm getting out of breath, but I wonder why. But anyway, I'm trying my best to keep it within now what I thought might be 10 minutes, okay? I'm closing. So before closing, I'd like to express my deepest thanks and appreciation to Politics and Prose for this opportunity to speak to you this afternoon, sharing my story. Thank you, Jenny. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank two people here today without whom this reissue could never have become a reality. John Saul, stand up. who first approached me last fall about having my book reissued. And once I went forward with it, unselfishly provided the guidance, the help, the support that was so essential in my seeing it through. John is an author of poems, and 2 of his published books are right here at Politics and Prose. And of course, I have to thank my wonderful son, Christopher, who's also here. Stand up, Chris. Whose invaluable help and hard work over the past 8 months made it all possible. And I mention that because I don't have a computer, I don't have email, I don't have all this modern technology for communication. Chris has a background of printing technology and graphic arts that he did, and he just filled in to do this reissue of my book, which is a job to do. And the first go around with a hardback, like Susan, I think, is that your name? Yeah. She described how it's not easy, to do your own. In fact, working on the reissue for 8 months with Christopher for this book was more work that I found than writing and doing this. And in here, like I said in the very first, at the start, is where I'm just going to rephrase it now. Yeah, on the front page of the reissue, I explained how it came to be the hardback, this one here, came to be within 6 months as a result of when Jackie moved to Greece and married Aristotle Onassis in 68. My life wasn't my own after that, and in 6 months, September 69, that's when the book was published. Which, you have your editor, your agent, the publisher, and all like that. So anyway, that's my story, and I thank all of you here this afternoon for coming by. So, is that too long? Did I overstay my time? Did? Okay, thank you. Oh, let me get my books and run. Okay, sorry about that.
All right, and lastly, we have Richard Selden, who's going to read from Pearls Beneath the Rind.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for coming out today, my wife, my friends. I appreciate the support very much, and the rest of you. As others have said, I wanted to thank Politics and Prose for arranging this. I've been a member for many years. It's just a great bookstore, no question about it. And I'm very happy to be here. Pearls Beneath the Rind is a collection of poems that my sister and I wrote together. About 25 years ago, without knowing each other had done it, we entered the same amateur poetry contest. When she found out that I had written a poem for the same contest, she was shocked, and I was a little ashamed that she had caught me. That began a collaboration that picked up at the time of our father's illness and death. We exchanged poems about him at that time. We then subsequently exchanged other poems. And all of a sudden, maybe 3 or 4 years ago on a big birthday, I'm not going to say which one it was, she sent me this very crude self-published version of Pearls Beneath the Rind. It had no editing at that point, and the preface that it had was relatively unworked compared to the one that's in here. It was one of the best birthday presents I had ever had. Subsequent to that, a friend of mine told me about Opus, and we researched other self-publishers and decided on one, Dog Ear Publishing, which we thought was very good. They did a very good job. But because of the kind of bookstore it is, I wanted to be in Politics and Prose's bookstore. So I published the book on Opus again. Self-publishers, as someone had mentioned, has some advantages, and their flexibility is one of those. My sister and I are completely different people. We had a kind of difficult beginning. We weren't very friendly when we grew up. We went to brother and sister camps together, which were located about half a mile apart. And we used to have these brother and sister Sunday gatherings for about an hour. I couldn't stand them, and she couldn't stand them. And I would look around and I would see other brothers and sisters getting along very well and feel very envious and wondered if there was something wrong with them or there was something wrong with me. Well, over the years, the relationship improved quite a bit. And the cooperation that we had in writing this was just wonderful. I mean, it was joyful. I don't think there was really any anger, no sensitivity about criticism. She lives in Arizona. She was a painter early on after becoming a poet and a short story writer. She tends to focus on landscapes and nature. She lives in rural Arizona, Chino Valley. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's not too far from Prescott. And I've lived in Washington all my life, very involved in psychoanalytic theory and practice from my own perspective, and I tend to write more about the mind. And I will begin now with a few of my poems and then a few of hers. It was a point of light. It was a point of light that couldn't be denied, growing as slowly as my age, or had been there all along, unseen. It was nonchalant, effortless, as spontaneous as space, as radiant is. Just a small point, mind you, and best unadorned by poetic abstractions, yet still it was there, illumining my being. The second poem is called Windmills for Sigmund. The days jerk by in rhythms I cannot exactly choose, appearing, disappearing, a run of angular riffs, notes that jar yet echo the source, while the messenger, perched on leather ruminating, listens for connections. This is one mode of the inner sanctum. What is and what will be are so preternaturally similar to what was. History is bunk, an idiot's bark over a land featuring spin by the millisecond and 50 varieties of vaginal spray to flee it. To know this is a problem, to feel this is a problem, provides little surcease. Our formulations proliferate and die like flies on violent neon. We've been around the block, around and around the block. We've rammed the block, we've handed the block, but the block is relentless. Chipping away to make the block unblock is fine. One might say it's the only way that counts, but time and space are limited. Perhaps nitro is preferable, or a laser. And then the third poem of mine I'd like to read is a tribute to Thelonious Monk, whose notes, the ones that he played, I loved, and the ones that he didn't play, I also loved. It's called Round Midnight. Outside the three-note cafe, the left bank swirled in a foggy blue wave to the wail of a sax hailing fingers that danced along ivories. As I took in the scene, I wondered how it would be, again with you beside me. And then the first poem of my sister's I'd like to read is called Skin Deep. If you open my skin, there'd be sediments from past loves, a time when skin was smooth, eyes alert and wanting. If you open my skin, you'd find oil and acrylic paint, charcoal and my favorite 4B drawing pencils, an apple for still lives, an imagination for everything else. There'd be an assortment of riches, debris that needed cleaning, and a cobweb as thick as night to hold them in, if you open my skin. And the second poem of hers I'd like to read is Changing Seasons. Sit upon the hill with me. Hear the cool sounds of fall sweep across our cheeks. Soon winter will push in, frost our skin crimson like the turning leaves. Sit upon the hill with me. Wonder at the iridescence of a spider's web, a soft glow in a delicate sun. Listen to the cicadas, their songs now staccato, desperate for an end-of-season mate. Sit upon the hill with me, but don't tell me the dog refused to eat, your leg hurts, or you need to buy coffee. Tell me you care. Tell me you had cared. Tell me you will always care. And if you can't tell me these things, then sit upon the hill with me one last time. Then this is a poem about Chino Valley, winter in Chino Valley. I live indoors in winter, bundled in layers, peering through my front window for anything green, anything plucky enough to withstand the bitter cold. It's the time of year when gophers and tarantulas burrow into frosted soil, when rabbits and skunks wrap their progeny in fur, when my neighbor's hard-skinned cows huddle together against the chill. The daily scenes don't change: naked tumbleweed gathering in barbed clumps, icy tree limbs bending in the strain of winter. A steady draft seeps through a window crack, blows against my cheek as I touch the cold glass. It tempts me to look outside again, witness the icing on mountaintops, crushed leaves piled on empty tree wells and Siberian elms like broom handles branching into night sky. The harsh stare on a horse's face, blanketed in heavy shawls, reminds me how lucky I am to be sheltered within. Protected from this Arctic weather, its frozen twists of air, I meet nature indoors on my turf and dissolve her in the warmth of my winter mouth. Thank you.
So we do have a few minutes for question and answer, or questions from the audience. So you can ask any author a question at this microphone over here, and I'll bring around the handheld for you to respond. Yeah, we're recording the event. That's what the microphone's for. It's not for the...
As a former teacher, I would like to ask the gentleman who wrote the very touching autobiography about your school experience. Would you tell me, please, was there any teacher, maybe one teacher, who encouraged you or got you proper help?
During elementary school, there was really none. I think as I went on in years and became into a program in DC, which was it's supposed to have been for illiteracy, but they labeled it mental retarded. So I ended up going into a program, and I met a teacher named Mr. Weldon Vaughn that basically, well, it was a few, Mr. Vaughn, Ms. Feldman, it was quite a few other teachers there, and the program that basically put me in the right direction and always talked to me about the game of life and how to live and what to do. And like I said, as I moved on, my sister was in a program also doing illiteracy, and seeing her get what she needed as far as her education kind of motivated me to finally step out and go ahead and do what I had to do as far as making sure that I can read and write better.
Well, I think we all admire you, and we're proud of you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Susan, I'd like to know, I'm sure that there are many advantages of being a worrywart. Can you tell us some of them?
Well, I can tell you a great
And did
one.
your daughters inherit that characteristic?
Luckily, I think, can you hear me? Okay. Luckily, I think my daughters did not inherit it. Well, I'll just give you an example of what it's like to be a worrywart. There's something I call like double worry, and this week I had triple worry. It's like multitasking. So if you have more than one thing to worry about, like, yes, I was anxious and nervous and wanted to prepare and do a good job today, but I had two other really big things, white girl worries, on my mind, and they really trumped it, so that believe it or not, I came in here relatively relaxed today. So, I don't know, be creative about what you worry about, I guess.
Are there any other questions today? All right. Well, like I said before, all the books are available here at the store all the time, especially today. And we'll be printing some in just a couple minutes in the fiction room, so come check it out if you want to. So thank you to all of our authors for coming today. It was a great event.